Right, picture this. The Sound of Music, 1965. Nuns at Nonnberg Abbey stand in a circle, wringing their hands in genuine despair, asking one another the most pressing question of their time. How do you solve a problem like Maria? Fast forward to 2025, and we have a rather different problem, but the same sense of mounting panic. Except this time, the question isn't being asked by religious sisters in Austria. It is being screamed into the void by Nigel Farage, and the problem is not a willful young governess with a talent for curtains. The problem is Kemi Badenoch. And frankly, this is far more entertaining than anything Julie Andrews ever did. Quick favor, if you are loving this already, hit that subscribe button. Over 94% of viewers have not yet. It is absolutely free, takes a second, and honestly, it means the world to us. Thanks. Now, back to the show. Here's what makes this genuinely compelling. We have two of Britain's most ambitious politicians locked in what can only be described as a full-throttle political tank battle. Both want the keys to number 10. Both believe they are the answer to Britain's problems. Both are willing to slug it out in the court of public opinion to prove it. And the absolutely bonkers part, they are not even from the same party. Well, not anymore, anyway. Kemi Badenoch is the Conservative Party leader. She has positioned herself as the anti-woke crusader, the woman who will take Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights, torch Westminster's obsession with net zero, and resurrect our high streets and housing market by wielding the axe to taxation with the precision of a medieval executioner. She has made it abundantly clear that she is not messing about. The Tories need a revival, and she is determined to be the phoenix rising from the ashes. The problem is, she is trying to do all of this while Reform UK, Nigel Farage's increasingly muscular political operation, has essentially parked its tanks squarely on the Conservative Party's front lawn and is showing absolutely no signs of moving. Now, let us talk about the polling figures, because they are genuinely fascinating. The latest YouGov poll has Reform sitting at 24%. That sounds impressive until you realize it is the lowest position they have occupied since April of last year. The Conservatives, meanwhile, are languishing at 20%. Neither figure is particularly comfortable, but here's where it gets interesting. The gap is closing. It is still a distance that would make a long-jump athlete uncomfortable, but it is closing nonetheless, and Badenoch is fighting like someone who absolutely knows what is at stake. She is determined to claw back those percentage points, overtake Reform, and establish herself as the dominant force on the right of British politics by the time we reach the 2029 general election. But here's where it gets properly audacious. The Conservatives are seriously considering using Badenoch as their Stop Farage candidate in a whole host of battleground seats. These are the constituencies that will ultimately determine who gets to walk through that famous black door at number 10. It's a brilliant tactical move, really. If the numbers break the right way, Badenoch could become the anti-Farage in the minds of voters who are terrified of populism, but equally frustrated with the establishment. And when YouGov presents Britons with a straight choice for Prime Minister between these two titans, Badenoch wins by a convincing 31% to 21%. That's not a rounding error, that's a proper advantage. So why, you might ask, is Farage not panicking? Why is he not throwing in the towel and retiring to count his numerous media appearances and controversial statements? Because Farage understands something fundamental about politics. It is not about who wins the popularity contest in a polling booth. It is about credibility, and credibility is a rather different beast entirely. Here's the thing about Kemi Badenoch's task. She has to convince you, the British voter, that the Conservative Party has fundamentally changed. She has to make you forget about Partygate, you know, that scandal where Boris Johnson's government was having quite literally the most offensive house parties, whilst the rest of us were locked in our homes, banned from seeing our dying relatives. She has to make you forget about Liz Truss's mini-budget, which crashed the pound, spooked the markets, and set off a chain reaction of economic chaos that made watching the news feel like watching a financial horror film. She has to make you forget about the interest rate hikes and the explosion in net migration that made immigration control seem like a policy written by someone who had never actually encountered a policy before. That's a monumentally tall order. It's asking voters to develop something akin to selective amnesia on an industrial scale. Nigel Farage's task, by contrast, is somewhat different but equally challenging. He needs to convince you, the British voter, that Reform UK is not going to collapse into utter chaos the moment it takes the reins of power. He needs to assure you that this is not some protest vote that will result in economic self-immolation within minutes of his government being sworn in. Because here's the brutal truth. Voters are terrified. They are terrified of voting for something they perceive as untested, unvetted, and potentially disastrous. It's a rational fear. Britain has had enough chaos in recent years without adding more to the pile. This is precisely why the defections matter so much. Not just any defections, mind you, but the right defections. The sorts of defections that signal to the markets, to the civil service, and to voters that Farage is assembling a team of serious, experienced individuals who will not be pushed around by unelected bureaucrats or spooked by a wobble in the financial sector. And here's what is genuinely impressive about what Farage has managed. He has attracted an array of experienced and fiercely ambitious former Conservatives. These are not fringe figures or has-beens. These are people who held genuine power, who sat around the cabinet table, who know how Whitehall actually works, the sort of people who wouldn't go near a political project they thought would self-immolate within minutes. They're betting their reputations on this. Take Najim Zahawi. The man was an utterly passionate and committed education secretary. He wasn't some nodding dog in the background. He was engaged, he had ideas, he had drive. Or consider Sir Jake Berry, one of the foremost champions of ending the North-South divide when he served as minister for the Northern Powerhouse. This was not a token appointment. He genuinely cared about regional inequality and fought for it. Then there's Danny Kruger, a man who knows the inside of Downing Street intimately, who has spent considerable time thinking seriously about the nation's most vexing social challenges. These are not fringe figures. These are people with track records and credibility. The message that these defections send is quite clear. Reform UK is not a banana republic. It is not going to descend into chaos. It is going to be run by people who have governed before, who understand the machinery of power, and who will not be bamboozled by the permanent civil service or intimidated by the financial establishment. That matters enormously. It matters because credibility is currency in politics, and Farage is busy accruing it by the bucketful. But here is where the plot truly thickens, and why this contest is so absolutely gripping. Both of these political operators are fighting for essentially the same thing, the trust of the British people. Badenoch needs to convince voters that the Conservatives have learned their lessons, that they have genuinely changed, and that they deserve another crack at running the country. Farage needs to convince voters that his team is competent, that they will not make things worse, and that reform is actually possible. It is fundamentally about whether voters believe in change or redemption. Do they think the Conservatives can be saved, or do they think Britain needs something entirely new? The stakes could not be higher. We are looking at the 2029 election, which feels simultaneously far away and uncomfortably close. Between now and then, everything can change. Economic conditions will shift. New scandals will inevitably emerge. The political landscape will evolve in ways we cannot currently predict. This is not a settled contest. This is fluid, dynamic, and absolutely anything could happen. What we are really witnessing is a fundamental battle for the soul of the British right. It is not about left and right in the traditional sense. It is about establishment versus anti-establishment. It is about continuity versus change. It is about whether voters believe institutions can be reformed or whether they need to be entirely replaced. These are profound questions that will determine the trajectory of British politics for years to come. The absolutely brilliant bit is that neither Badenoch nor Farage is going to give an inch. Both will fight viciously for every percentage point and every vote. Both will attempt to define the other in terms that are maximally unflattering. It is going to be brutal, and frankly, it is compulsive viewing. This is politics at its most entertaining and consequential, all wrapped up in one gripping narrative. So we are back to the original question: how do you solve a problem like Kemi? The answer is not by musical numbers and governess wisdom. It is by building a competent team, winning back the trust of the British people, and gambling that they are hungry for genuine change rather than mere redemption. Whether that gamble pays off will be the defining political question of the next 5 years. What makes this saga so captivating is that both camps genuinely believe they are right. Badenoch and her Conservatives are convinced that if they convince the public they have learned their lessons, they can reassemble a winning coalition. They believe the Conservative brand is fundamentally stronger than the alternative. They point to their polling advantage and argue that voters will recoil from supporting an insurgent movement. Farage is absolutely certain that the British people are exhausted with the establishment. He believes his movement taps into something deeper, a desire for genuine change and politicians who speak plainly. The polling numbers suggest he might be right. 24% is a formidable starting position for any challenger. The economy will likely prove decisive. If there is another downturn before 2029, voters will want reassurance that whoever they vote for understands fiscal responsibility. Badenoch can point to her team's experience. Farage can argue that the old ways have failed and only new approaches will succeed. Both arguments have merit. External events are another wild card. Major international crises or economic shocks could fundamentally alter the landscape before 2029. A major recession would likely favor the challenger. Strong growth would favor the incumbent. What we can say with confidence is this: the next 5 years will be absolutely riveting. The battle between Badenoch and Farage will define British politics. Every defection will be scrutinized. Every polling shift will be analyzed endlessly. Every speech and announcement will be dissected in real time. The Conservatives are hoping voters develop short memories and that Badenoch's freshness can persuade people that change is possible within the existing framework. Reform is banking on the opposite, that voters are tired of incrementalism and hungry for something genuinely different. The real question is not, how do you solve a problem like Kemi? It is what the British people actually want. Do they want redemption for the Conservatives, or do they want revolution through reform? Do they believe institutions that can be reformed, or do they believe those institutions are too broken to fix? That is the genuine contest at the heart of this political battle, and it will be extraordinarily interesting to watch unfold over the next several years. Thanks ever so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do stick around for more content about British politics. Cheers!